Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre addressing the Assembly of First Nations. Let's listen.
And I'd like to thank your National Chief, Woodhouse, and members of the AFN, Chief in Assembly, youth, veterans, and those elders who have guided and prayed for a good assembly. Thank you in particular, National Chief, for inviting me here today, but also for taking the time to pray with myself and, more importantly, my wife Anna, and to remind both of us that there is a creator of all things who imparts wisdom and guidance that we should seek every single day. Wisdom also comes from those who came before us, and that, of course, includes our first peoples who have been here since time immemorial. I want to thank and honor you for bringing thousands and thousands of years of ancestral history to this assembly. From this history flows the treaties and Section 35 constitutional rights, which recognize and affirm your rights and relationship with the Crown of Canada. As I was flying into Montreal, I looked down at the ground beneath, and I thought, it's easy to understand why you've chosen to gather in this particular spot. For thousands of years, when the rivers were the highways of this land, this was a place for people to meet and exchange goods and ideas. Just south of us, on the shores near Verdun, archaeologists have found artifacts going back 5,000 years, including copper that likely originated at Lake Superior, evidence of highly sophisticated trade networks that existed here and right across North America, supported by agreements between nations that facilitated a free enterprise that is as impressive as what we see today. This is my first meeting with you in person, but I hope it will be the first of many. I want the next generation of Canada and the next government that I hope to have the privilege to lead, to build a genuine partnership with First Nations, a nation-to-nation relationship based on the recognition of rights and mutual respect. It may surprise some of you to learn that the values and institutions of your pre-colonial history that I described moments ago are shared by Conservatives. Values of faith and spirituality, values of acknowledging a higher creator, values of family as the greatest social safety net we have, values of tradition, the traditions, stories, and knowledge that are the foundation of any people, that form a long chain that connects one generation to the next, those that were, those that are, and those that will be, and makes each person understand that he is a part of something bigger than himself. Values of entrepreneurship, the kind of inventiveness and determination that allowed First Peoples to survive in this unforgiving land for millennia without today's comforts. Values of the land, an attachment to a place and a duty to harvest its bounty while passing it on pristine to those that follow. These Indigenous values, faith, family, work, tradition, entrepreneurship, and land will guide everything I do as Prime Minister. But let me be clear, I'm not here to run your life. I don't want to run anybody's life. I want to run a small government with big citizens, free to make their own decisions and live their own lives. This is especially true for First Nations peoples. Every one of you in this room is a leader. Every one of you knows your communities better than Ottawa does, and certainly better than I do. You draw on thousands of years of experience, while Canada has only been here for a century and a half. That's why we will get the government gatekeepers, the federal government gatekeepers, out of your way so you can do what's best for your members. My promise to all Canadians is that a common-sense Conservative government will axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime. This is my general commitment, but it is of particular importance to First Peoples. Axe the tax means canceling a carbon tax that is making food and groceries more unaffordable for everyone, but especially for First Nations people. Because of the remote and colder weathers that you must confront, this tax is particularly cruel and unjust, and that is why I support the Chiefs of Ontario and their judicial review to counter this unjust tax burden. But I have good news. When I am Prime Minister, the Chiefs of Ontario will not have to spend any more money on lawyers because I will axe the tax, and when I say it, I mean it. Build the homes. We need to make it easier for you to provide your housing for your people. I know that the demand for housing among your members has grown faster than supply because the federal government has consistently failed your communities by raising the cost of construction with layers of bureaucracy and pricing you out of the housing market on your own land. Common sense Conservatives will work to cut red tape in Ottawa and create new financing and mortgage options that make buying, building, and renovating homes more affordable. Stop the crime. We need to stop the crime everywhere, but we also need to acknowledge that there has been a particular problem with crime in rural and remote communities since 2015. And part of this is that the federal government has not provided adequate or competent policing. We need to fix that by cooperating with First Nations leaders and looking at new models that allow you to chart your own course on policing if you so choose. And I've been happy to discuss these matters with your national chief. We need to cut off the flow of illicit drugs and gang activities that threaten communities. We also need to stop Justin Trudeau's wacko policies of legalizing drugs and leaving addicts at the mercy of predatory drug dealers. It means turning hurt into hope by building recovery centres, using traditional Indigenous knowledge and healing traditions to give addicts the help they need to break the cycle of drug use and heal their bodies and minds. I've also discussed with the National Chief ways that we can improve policing by removing bureaucracy and giving more autonomy to local communities who want it. And fix the budget. It means cutting waste in Ottawa and putting power back in the hands of local leaders and the common people of Canada. There's so much untapped potential in this country. So much of that potential resides in your nations and communities. For too long, you've been held back by a broken system that takes power away from you and places it in the hands of politicians and bureaucrats in Ottawa. That's why I'm committed to ending the Ottawa knows best paternalistic system. As you know, the Indian Act puts reserve land and money in the hands of the federal government, which means you often have to go to Ottawa to ask for tax revenues collected from resource development on your very own lands. No other government has to do that. The result is that money is wasted on paperwork and there's less left over for the good projects that you seek to advance in your own communities. My goal is to reduce the bureaucracy and simplify the funding for your nations. One way to do that could be by converting more of the project-by-project grants into predictable funding streams that you can count on and borrow against for major capital projects without endlessly filling out forms or waiting for answers from Ottawa. That is also why common sense Conservatives support the First Nations resource charge that will allow you to take back control of your resource money that is rightfully yours. This is a first. Thank you. Although I don't deserve the applause, this was a First Nations developed idea. I simply came along and accepted it, put it in my platform. You all did the hard work of developing this idea. I'm simply here to follow your marching orders and make it happen. It's a completely optional model that will simplify negotiations between resource companies and First Nations, so that you don't have to waste years on endless negotiations reinventing the wheel every time there's a new project. It will be a very simple to administer program. Here's how it works. First Nations can collect taxes from resource companies, and those companies will get a 50% refundable tax credit from the federal government that will vacate the space and make it economically viable for them to do so. This new approach will mean the money goes directly to you rather than from the community to the federal government and then all the way back. It would not actually stop you from also signing impact benefit agreements or making other arrangements that are already available to you. The choice would be yours and the option would be on the table. It would put you back in charge of your money. It will mean less waste in Ottawa and more money for your communities. And that money will mean powerful paychecks, services, training, clean drinking water, and economic opportunity. I've made no secret about my desire to see more economic growth and development. I talk about it everywhere. It will give people better jobs, more opportunities, and powerful paychecks. And all that depends on economic growth. That means listening to you when you have concerns about projects, yes, but it also means listening to you when you support development, and especially when your members and your leaders and are partners in those projects. If reconciliation means anything, it means saying yes to economic opportunities that First Nations are asking for. Yet this federal government has repeatedly shut down projects that have the support of strong majorities of local First Nations, almost never with proper consultation beforehand. That is unacceptable. When your future is at stake, your right to say yes is as important as your right to say no. And when you think about it, I believe in Section 35 consultation rights. I believe those rights require our government consult with people who want projects to go ahead, as well as those who do not want them to go ahead. When this government killed the Tech Frontier Mine, a $20 billion project, it didn't consult with all the surrounding First Nations that supported the project, nor has it properly consulted with the many First Nations in Northern Ontario that want the Ring of Fire, but can't get it because we have a wacko environment minister who doesn't want to grant a permit to build a road to get there. You know, we need to get the federal government to consult with you on your opinion, even when that opinion is yes. And this is important because we've seen the successes that can happen when we say yes. The LNG Canada project, a $40 billion project initiated by former Haisla Chief Councillor Ellis Ross. This is the single biggest construction project in Canadian history, and I'm very proud that Ellis Ross will be a candidate for the Common Sense Conservatives and a member of Parliament after the next election. The Haisla Nation is also pushing ahead with a $3.28 billion Cedar LNG project. The Inuk Cree is building under the leadership of then Chief Billy Morin, who's also a common sense conservative candidate running in the next election, is building the first surgical centre on reserve in Canada, which will provide revenue for his people and care for all Albertans. The Mi'kmaq First Nations have shown that First Nations traditional knowledge can be used in food and the production of nutritious foods by purchasing Clearwater seafoods in Nova Scotia. And my personal favorite, the Squamish in BC are building 6,000 housing units on 10 acres of land. Now this is right inside Vancouver. It never would have happened, by the way, if the decision was left to Vancouver City Hall, because their gatekeepers would have dragged it out forever and blocked it from happening. We're seeing more and more First Nations communities are more open for business, more progressive in getting things done than their neighboring municipalities. I spoke to an investor here in Montreal who said he planned to invest in the city of Calgary, but all the bureaucracy and the cobweb of confusion at City Hall there blocked him. So he went next door to Susina. He said it was the best place to do business he's ever been, and so he's investing his millions there. This is a real opportunity. The incompetence and obstructiveness of municipal governments will provide a competitive advantage to those First Nations communities who open the door to business and create opportunity for their people, and I can't wait to facilitate that with you. Those are just a few examples of First Nations entrepreneurship and initiative, but there are countless others that we need to pursue. The reality is we don't have billions. We have trillions of dollars of resource wealth right beneath our feet. That wealth belongs in many cases to you and your communities. Your children can be the richest in the world if we unleash these opportunities. And that's why we will be laser focused on economic growth and opportunity for First Nations. But I also know that there's more to reconciliation than that. For many decades, your cultures, your languages, and your way of life have been silenced and sidelined by the federal government. Just a couple of years ago, the federal government tried to pass a law banning hunting rifles. This would have effectively criminalized the traditional way of life of your communities. Common Sense Conservatives thank the AFN for standing up and defending the rights of your people and all people to own hunting rifles and harvest the land responsibly. And we will continue to do that. Protecting and preserving history, culture, and tradition are the bedrock of Conservative values. Common Sense Conservatives will support you and your knowledge keepers to keep customs, traditions, and history alive, to pass your stories on to your children and grandchildren, and to better educate all Canadians. The story of Indigenous people in this land from time immemorial is one of strength and resilience, and it includes your great contributions to building and defending the country that we share today. Indigenous soldiers have served with distinction in every war in which Canadians have fought, from 1812 to First World War, Second World War, Korea, and most recently Afghanistan. At Queenston Heights, 300 Mohawk warriors under the leadership of Chiefs John Norton and John Brandt led an early assault that broke the spirits of the American invaders. At Vimy Ridge, Indigenous marksmen and infantrymen helped Canada win the victory that defined us as a country in the eyes of the world. This history is rightly a source of pride for your members, and it should be known by all Canadians. I don't believe in canceling or denying history, but I do believe in telling the whole story. For me, that means adding more names and more stories and more voices to our national narrative. Canadian school children should know about the pain, but also the pride of the First Nations people. Figures like Thanel Delther, Chief Poundmaker, Chief Crowfoot, Catherine Sutton, Joseph Brandt, Tommy Prince, Mary Two Axe Early should be as familiar as the European names that used to exclusively fill our textbook. The heroism of First Nations should be known by all. Turning from the past to the future, Common Sense Conservatives will partner with you as you write new stories for your people, new stories of growth and prosperity, of dignity and self-determination, of healing and revival. This means that education, resources, and facilities have to match the high ambition of your children, especially in northern and remote communities that have been deprived of resources and opportunities for too long. The federal government can help with this, but it can't do it alone. So I issue a challenge to the CEOs in the towers around this building to train Indigenous youth and give them the opportunities. Before these CEOs think to fly in foreign workers to fill job opportunities, they should first and foremost be offering those jobs to Indigenous youth. Thank you. I know that the relationship between First Nations and the federal government has been painful and destructive because of the federal government's terrible decisions. For decades, the residential school system removed children from the love and care of their families. It was a monstrous abuse of excessive governmental power that cut your children off from their cultures, languages, and traditions. In many cases, students were neglected and abused. Tragically, too many young children never came home. Those were terrible crimes by a big and imposing government against each victim and against your communities. In 2008, the federal government, under then Prime Minister Harper, issued an apology and launched the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. But there is more work to be done. I know that Canada has no future without a strong future for the First Nations people. As Justice Lamar of the Supreme Court said in the Delgamuukw case, we are all here to stay. All of our futures are intertwined, like the small rivers that flow into the St. Lawrence to make a great highway of prosperity. What each of us brings to the table will combine to bring the success of all of us. I am here, Prime Minister, in its proper meaning, it means first servant. That is my job, to be a servant of all the people and to be a partner to the First Nations. I know that it won't be easy. We won't always agree. And you've heard enough promises and enough performative reconciliation. Well, we need our honest and direct conversations and a partnership based on a nation-to-nation relationship and mutual respect. I come here to offer that respect in total humility and thank you for your immense contributions as we move forward together with your values and to unleash the potential of all Canadians. Thank you very much. Would you like me to sit down?